Okie dokie, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. How are we today? It is fabulous to see you on this lovely Monday. Happy new start to the week. We've got some fun astrological stuff happening this week that I'll be talking about in my daily forecasts. For those of you who are joining on, Brother Lighthearts, so great to see you, my dear. Everybody jumping on Facebook, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. For those of you on Instagram, you can actually see my new desk. My new desk, yes. I'm very excited to be doing my first forecast in my new desk. She's so pretty. I wish you guys could see it. Maybe I'll post it on TikTok or something. But anyway, we are here for the Astro-Babble. That is why we're here. We are here to talk about charts. We are here to work off the queue. I did an all call last week for charts and I received over 100 charts from you guys in 24 hours. Absolutely ridiculous. So if you are on the list, please be patient. But I will message you before your chart is featured just so you know when to tune in. But we are taking 5 of those charts and we are going to run through them just cold. Haven't looked at them before. We're going to talk about astrology, what makes a chart, and some fun astro stuff, and hopefully weave in some humor throughout. So let's go ahead, let's get started. And for those of you who are on Instagram, if you would like to actually see the charts that I'm looking at, you can either pop onto Facebook or you can watch the replay on YouTube, which will have the actual visual chart as well. Okay, so Logan's first. I see him. I see him. I see him on Instagram, waiting to get his chart read. So excited to have Logan's chart first in the queue. Let's take a peek. So we've got a Virgo ascendant, which is where the detail-oriented nature comes in, the love for facts, the love for things like feng shui, making sure that everything has its own mise en place, the ability of everything to have its proper place, which makes Mercury the ruler of the chart. Now, Mercury is stubbornly located up in Taurus in the ninth, but putting the Lord of the chart in the ninth house does bestow the native, the person whose chart we're reading, with the gifts of the ninth house, which are plentiful. The ninth house is known for things like astrology, but it's also known for travel, foreigners, higher education, and spirituality. Those 4 topics are going to be very present within the native's life, as well as just overall having a very mercurial nature to the life. When people come in to see me for chart consults and readings, as modern society, we're very addicted to the sun sign, right? And in Logan's case, the sun sign is important because it's Gemini, which is co-ruled by Mercury, the lord of the chart. So we have connection there, right? But we also need to understand that in some charts, the sun sign may not match up with the lord of the chart or the ascendant. In this chart, it's actually the opposite. The lord of the chart is ruling both the ascendant and the sun sign, making the lord of the chart, Mercury, very, very powerful, very, very influential in the chart, because this Mercury in the ninth house in Taurus, well placed in the house, a house that I think that Mercury enjoys very nicely, which is the ninth house of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality. Again, for those of you who didn't catch that before, Mercury being placed here really does give us a flavor of that kind of transient, really kind of mystical energy that comes through in the chart, but is in the fixed sign of Taurus. So there's a stubbornness to it. And this is when I've seen Mercury in Taurus in the ninth house before, there are a couple ways that I've seen it manifest. And one of those ways is somebody who is stubborn, but not stubborn in a rational way, stubborn in an escapist way. And this can sometimes be really hard, especially because when we're children, our brain is told that we need to be focusing on specific things when Mercury is in Taurus. Mercury in Taurus is about understanding the ritual, the routine, the mental habits, and the boxes that feel good mentally, and sticking to those boxes. But the ninth house is a house of worldliness. It's a house of seeking. It's a house of, in some ways, at its worst, the ninth house is a house of escapism. And so Mercury in Taurus will constantly make the native flee into areas that feel comfortable but are often far away from the rational. But that Mercury is also ruling the Sun in Gemini, as well as Mars in Gemini, the MC in Gemini, and the North Node in Gemini in the 10th. Um, and this is a beautiful kind of stepping stone into the purpose of the chart, which is unpacking what a Gemini 10th house looks like. So the 10th house is the house of success. And when we see the house of success with so many very important markers here, not only the sun, which rules the ego or the identification of the self, but also Mars, the planet of action, the MC, the highest point of the chart, somebody's personal definition of success, as well as the North Node here, where somebody is going throughout the course of their life, their personal north, who they are turning into, all being in that dual-natured sign of Gemini, ruled by Mercury in the ninth, using that escapist tendency to garner success through things like whimsy, fantasy, traveling all over the world, working with international clientele, and understanding that the mental realm, the idea realm, is what will be kind of known for in this chart. The idea that fame will come through fantasy is direct kind of relation to the ninth house, 10th house paradigm that we're seeing linked in that chart dynamic. Let's see. Where do we want to go next in the chart? It is strange, though, because money will not necessarily be made through those 10th house pursuits. The idea of success, work, and money are separate topics in astrology. So what somebody is known for, their vocation, may not necessarily be what they earn a living from. Yeah. And in this case, we have the second house of Libra with finances. Saturn is here, which is exalted. Nice, although it is retrograde. Pluto is also retrograde, so money will be much, much better after 30 and especially after 50 when those two time-based planets mature. But Venus in Cancer in the 11th is ruling the second house of finance. So it would very much be that finances in this chart are connected to group activities. Finances in this chart are connected to community organizations, events, philanthropic efforts. I would work for a nonprofit. Yeah, that's how I would kind of channel that energy, especially because the moon in Aquarius in the sixth house of work is being ruled by that Saturn from the second, who is also kind of tied in with that Venus in Cancer. You facilitating and holding space for large groups of people, you being an event coordinator, you working within the community to do larger outreach, you working potentially on political campaigns, especially with that ninth house also representing law in the legal field. To a certain extent, I think that all of that would be very, very beneficial for you to kind of dive into. But the more you surround yourself with community, the more money you will make. And that's something that we can use in astrology, even if that doesn't necessarily line up with the career. The more you interject yourself into large groups of people, money will just naturally flow your way. And that's part of how we tap into the energetics of a natal chart. We do have a lot of family baggage though in the chart, which I think is what's keeping the success pins in check from moving forward, because we have Jupiter in Sagittarius, which would naturally be, a great placement, but Jupiter is retrograde, very, very close to Uranus in Sagittarius, who is also retrograde. South Node is here. Neptune in Sagittarius is also retrograde in the fourth. So we have family drama, we have family issues, we have karmic debts that need to be paid in the family space. And I think if we were to honor that, specifically if you wanted to work with Jupiter to heal the ancestral line and to make sure that you as a person aren't being held back by the umbilical cord of your spiritual kind of connections, that would be something to work on to make sure that you leverage the idea of success being foremost. But I think again, if you recognize that your vocation is not necessarily tied to your money. Your vocation is definitely in the realm of international travel, foreigners, fantasy, spirituality, unlocking those topics. But then if you really wanted money, go volunteer, go work in the community, go hook up with a philanthropic organization, and work on the karmic debts that need to be paid. That's kind of the crux of your chart, Logan. So thank you so much. Love you. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And let's go ahead and move on to chart number 2. Okay, so chart number 2 is Aliana. Let's take a peek at her chart. Interesting, we have another Virgo ascendant, so that's a fun theme of the day. And this is what I love about astrology. Just because somebody has a Virgo ascendant and another person has a Virgo ascendant doesn't mean that those two ascendants are created equally. Because from a traditional astrology perspective, what happens in a natal chart is the chart is very colored by the ruler of the chart, so the planet that rules the sign on the ascendant. And in the last chart, we had Mercury in Taurus, which the fixed earth sign of Taurus doesn't really jive with Mercury too well. It's a fixed sign. Mercury is all about being free and expressing oneself, so that can kind of hamper Mercury. Here we have a very different flavored Mercury. Here we have Mercury in Cancer, and Mercury in Cancer is co-present with Jupiter in Cancer, an exalted Jupiter, as well as the Sun in Cancer, all in the 11th house of friendships. Actually, you and Logan would be fast friends because you have a lot to teach each other for sure. So, where does this put us? So, when the Lord of the chart is present within the 11th house of friendships, we have a high focus on connections and community in the chart. The 11th house is also the chart of social media, of community organizations, of philanthropic efforts, like large groups of people, the tribe, yeah, the collective niche of somebody's kind of brethren and sisterhood. So we have Mercury here in Cancer, as well as Jupiter in Cancer, Sun in Cancer. You know, that totally makes you the mom friend. That really does put a lot of really great friendships in your path. If you're ever in a tight spot, relying on your friendships is going to be something that I think will be heavily important, not just because you literally have the most beneficial planet in the astrological lineup in the sign of his exaltation in this placement, but the ruler of your chart is also here, so it's a strong space for you to lean into. Now there is a problem here. There is a problem here. And we do have the Sun in Cancer combusting Mercury and Jupiter. So Mercury and Jupiter are within 7.5 degrees of the Sun, meaning that the Sun's light is eclipsing those two planets and putting them in a little bit of detriment. Now, it doesn't overshadow the benefit of having an exalted Jupiter so close to the Lord of your chart, but it does mean that you tend to put the mother in smother. That Cancer Sun can really wreak havoc if you don't understand the idea of unconditional love. If you're looking for a love that returns value to you or emotional gratification to you immediately, that is not the kind of love that your Cancer Sun needs to be expressing in the 11th house. Like, you need to be giving unconditionally. Like, even though it's that book, that childhood book, and I forget the name of the book, but it's about the mother hen who asks for help to make the bread, and everybody refuses to help her, but then when she makes the bread, everybody wants some. And I think to a certain extent, boundaries are important in that dynamic, and the lesson is valid, but you can't resent people and cut them out of your life just because they refuse to help you on one occasion. Right? Now, if they have a history of that and they're just a bad friend, yeah, that's different. But you as a person need to understand that your conditional love is going to be the bane of your existence. And we really need to make sure that that Sun in Cancer isn't eclipsing your Cancer 11th house as a whole, because that's going to be some watery toxicity that, as a double Cancer, like, I'm familiar with. I get it, darling, but you just need to be a little bit wary of that lesson. Now there is a very interesting dynamic in the chart, and I see what you meant when you said your chart is very interesting, because we have a stellium pile up in Capricorn opposing not just the ruler of the chart, Jupiter, and but also the Sun. So we have a full moon in Capricorn co-present with a Uranus retrograde in Capricorn, Neptune retrograde in Capricorn, and Saturn retrograde in Capricorn in the fifth house of children. This makes the topic of children very, very difficult. This makes the topic of creativity very, very difficult. This makes the fifth house topics and the 11th house topics at odds with each other. So there is this need to be surrounded by social groups in one's tribe and to be socially free and to be that kind of lovey-dovey hippie mother hen archetype that's just, taking care of the community. But then there's this selfish aspect. There is this hermit aspect where you really want to turn into a gremlin and lock yourself in your craft room and really just kind of be isolated in your tinkering. Yeah. So the need to balance those two very present extremes in your chart. Now, a full moon in Capricorn, a full moon in the chart would naturally make somebody very emotional, would naturally put somebody very much in touch with their emotions. However, a full moon in Capricorn co-present with Saturn retrograde in the fifth, that really does tell me that there is a tendency to emotionally retreat. And although you make those needs known on a regular basis, it doesn't always make it easier for those around you when you decide to go into your cave and disappear for 2 days. Because, again, Capricorn, as that cardinal earth sign, likes to take things slow, likes to put up walls, likes to put moats around the walls, likes to put drawbridges around the moats around the walls, likes to put alligators in the moats around the drawbridges around the walls, gargoyles on top who shoot flaming arrows of death around the moat, around the crocodiles, around the moats around the walls. Like, that's just something that we will need to contend with in the fifth house of children and creativity and parenting. Should you choose to have children, your children will be very affluent in the community. They will follow in your footsteps. They will be very gregarious. They will embody the best side of that exalted Jupiter in Cancer. However, your parenting style will be very strict because you know how you would behave and what you would need to rein in all of that emotionality. But remember that what you need as medicine is not necessarily the medicine of your children. We have that Saturn retrograde ruling the sixth house of work. So you actually working with children, or specifically in a disciplinarian role, like you would be a great vice president, or vice president. You would be a great vice principal. You would be a great principal. You would do great in the scholastic setting. As far as being a teacher, you definitely have the skill set for it. I enjoy you working with children in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, as well as with animals, and in the health field, like you would do very well in those topics altogether, just because that nurturing side of Cancer will come forward and that motherly archetype will come forward, as well as the ruler of your sixth house of work being in the fifth house of children. I like it. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about with this chart? Relationships are interesting because you're going to be attracted to somebody and you will find your spouse through your tribe in the community, which is one of the reasons why you find yourself trying to be so gregarious all the time, is because your soulmate, your partner, is also pulling you into the community, into the spotlight where they're located. You're attracted to somebody who's very spiritual, very nurturing, who can take care of you with unconditional tenderness, but who can also throw an awesome rager because of that Jupiter and Pisces connection. How you will make money is actually through your fame, which I enjoy when paired with the 11th house, which rules social media. If you have not considered being an influencer or being a little bit heavier on social media, I would highly encourage it for your chart, because this Venus and Gemini in the 10th, ruling your second house via Libra, is flawless. And I really think that would be an excellent opportunity for you to not just make quick cash by leveraging the power of interconnected media, but also for you to recognize that, like, if you decide to be a social media coordinator for your job, like, that would be an extra paycheck, extra income that you could ask for, which you would be naturally good at, that other people would kind of shy away from. So yeah, that's just something to kind of be aware of. Lovely. And I think that's it. I think the chart is going cold. Yep, thank you so much, my dear, for donating your chart to science. Okay. Let's take a quick peek at chart number 3. Hello, my dear. How are you on Instagram? Everybody who's jumping on Instagram and Facebook, thank you. I'm occasionally seeing the comments because I'm really kind of focused on the reading aspect. But good morning. Good morning to everybody. Cheers. So Mary is next in the queue. Let's take a peek at Mary's chart. Some very heavy Scorpio energy here. Very heavy Scorpio energy here. So we have, oh, Lord Mary, Lord. So we have the ascendant in Scorpio. We also have the moon at 0 degrees of Scorpio. We also have the moon conjoined retrograde Neptune in Scorpio in the first house of self, which brings up some very interesting personality and body things that we need to talk about. Mary? So, having 2 key personality markers in Scorpio in the first house does tell me that we need to be very aware of your Scorpio side. Like, yes, you have the watery Pisces side as well, which makes you a triple water sign, which water is an element you'll need to learn how to navigate throughout your life in terms of the intuition, the empathy, the emotional side of things. But Scorpio is where your heart is. It's also what rules a majority of your personality. Scorpio is the sign of the underworld. It's the sign of the secret keeper. It's the sign of the psychopomp. It's the sign of the eternal goth who just enjoys the macabre, who understands the darker side of life, who enjoys playing in the shadows and the mysteries, who is very perceptive, very detective oriented, but also hypersensitive and rather defensive. So that all needs to be taken into account. We also have Scorpio in terms of a medical astrology standpoint. Scorpio rules the body systems of the bladder, the colon, the sinus, and the reproductive areas. That means that hormones are going to be very, very important for you to keep an eye on, as well as your digestive tract, as well as your urinary tract, and your sinuses. Those are going to be the 4 body systems that you need to be hyper aware of. And in fact, because we have Neptune here as well, that also increases the sensitivity of those body systems. So what you'll probably notice throughout the course of your life is that alcohol and medication affects you very, very highly, more so than most. Because Neptune blurs the boundaries. And Scorpio is already really sensitive, but putting watery Neptune here retrograde tends to put those boundaries at an even weaker or flimsier state. Yeah, so if you tend to get UTIs, if your hormones start to be weird, if you start to develop sinus problems, or you start to notice reproductive colon sinus, yeah, those major areas start to become inflamed or temperamental, that means you're on the wrong track physically, and you might be responding to something in your environment dietarily or energetically as well. Because water signs as a whole, speaking as a triple water sign as well, our placements are kind of reversed. But I have 2 Cancer Sun, Cancer Moon, and then Scorpio rising. And one of the things that I need to respect in my life as well as in my body is it could be something I ate, it could be a lack of exercise, it could be a medication, it could be a supplement, it could be anything physical, yeah? But it could also be my emotional state that's triggering physical symptoms, and I need to constantly check in with that because water doesn't do boundaries. Water prefers to absorb and reflect anything that is in the environment. So if you're having a bad emotional day, symptoms are going to be turned up to 11, and it doesn't mean that your body's falling apart. It just means that your body is definitely going to be hypersensitive than most. Thank you. I'm glad that you enjoy the pinky tattoo and Saturn. Anyway, Mary, so let's go ahead and let's keep picking apart your chart real quick. The ruler of your chart is going to be Mars in Capricorn in the 3rd, an exalted Mars at 0 degrees, sextile the moon. Ooh, so nerdy. By degree, Mary. By degree. What? Ooh, that is delicious. That's so special. I enjoy that aspect immensely. You have no idea. So the Lord of your chart is exalted, which is flawless. Mars loves to be in Capricorn. It's like putting that combustive fire in a nice strong engine where it can have the steel walls to contain it, but it can also channel its energy for true momentum. I love, love, love an exalted Mars ruling the chart, but it's also ruling the chart from the third house of writing, teaching, and speaking. So if you're not already teaching, writing, and speaking, if you're not already sharing your knowledge, if you're not already a teacher, a communicator, a public speaker, a writer, this is something that you absolutely need to have in your life, especially if it revolves around Scorpio-based topics like sex, like the underworld, like intense spirituality, like transformation, like haunted things. You know, you would be a great murder mystery novelist. Um, let's see. So that's just lovely. I adore that, Mary. I adore that for you on so many levels. So many levels. Just divine. We do have the North Node in the second house. Saturn is here in the second house, which I'm not a fan of. Saturn in a financial house doesn't really bode well for finances, especially in a mutable sign, which tends to slip money through fingers. Money is something that you'll need to learn how to master throughout the life, but you'll find that with attention comes money as well. So leveraging your attention properly is going to be a big part of it. And again, markers for creativity coming forward as well, with the Sun in Pisces ruled by Jupiter, who is also ruling your second house of finance. So that's an excellent little kind of backing of the idea that you should be in the creative arts, specifically of writing, working with children. Again, the teacher archetype coming very, very forward here. Yeah, and then there is Venus in Aries in the sixth house of work, being ruled by Mars in the third house of teaching. Again, the teaching stuff, the writing stuff coming very, very forward, Mary. I would highly encourage you to pursue those topics professionally if you have not already. It's also very important for you to understand that because Venus is in Aries in your seventh house and ruling your seventh house via Taurus, that you will likely find your spouse working in your same profession. But Venus in Aries is in fall, and Venus in Aries has a very unique style of love, which is the prove it to me style of love that I think we need to discuss, because the spouse that you choose needs to understand that you are here to grow, you are here to learn, you are here to succeed. And if they are not here to grow, to learn, to succeed, to perform, and to perform well in the top of the class, then they will not garner your love and affection. Yeah, it's a nasty little side effect of having Venus in a sign she doesn't like. Venus in Aries is the measuring stick of the astrological placement. She really wants to make sure that you're constantly beating your time, that you're beating your own record. And that can be a little bit problematic for Taurus, because Taurus likes things to be consistent and even, and to use the least amount of energy to establish the most amount of productivity. So that can be a little bit tricky, where expectations placed on the lover, placed on the partner, don't necessarily bode well for an ideal bond until they understand that you're looking for their own growth. Um, and that's it? The chart is dead? Okay, chart is dead. Perfect. So that is it, Mary. Thank you so much for donating your chart to the live stream. I very, very much appreciate you. Thank you for donating your chart. We are on chart number 4 in our live stream now. Let's talk about prudence. Prudence. Cheers. Whenever I see the word or the name Prudence, I always think of Charmed with Prue, Shannon Doherty. Sucks that she got kicked out because she was being not so nice, but just love Charmed as a series. Okay, so we have Aquarius on the ascendant. Ooh, an Aquarius on the ascendant that is applying to a conjunction with Mars in Aquarius. That's interesting. Quite the little rebel Prudence is. Quite the rebel. Aquarius is the sign of the genius. And when I say that, I mean kind of the Albert Einstein type genius, where people look at the frizzy hair and they look at the weird clothes and they hear you speak, but they don't necessarily understand what you're saying. But pairing that with Mars really does put a very harsh and combustive, potentially angry edge on rebellious, emphasizing the rebellion of Aquarius. Um, I think is very important. Aquarius is the archetype of the rebel, but especially with Mars, the planet of war and aggression in the sign of the rebel conjoining the ascendant, we need to be aware that acting out is something that will be very, very present in the chart. But you know, what is acting out in youth then becomes the positive spin of the risk taker later in life, right? And I think that that's something that we need to kind of understand in any chart is a chart evolves, a chart grows, and it grows with us for sure. Um, and so with that Mars and Aquarius being so close to the ascendant, there's there's going to be some fighter spirit that's probably going to be mischanneled earlier in life. But as the chart grows and evolves, that need to push the limits, that need to push the boundaries will actually lead to some pretty great success. And why I'm confident in that is because of this. We have a lovely placement, and I'm getting chills just kind of thinking about it. Just great placement because the Lord of the chart is Saturn, up in the 10th house of success, which means that Saturn is placed in Scorpio in mutual reception with Mars. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is not just a thrill seeking placement, but it's somebody who truly understands that success is not without sacrifice, success is not without taking risk, success is not without pushing the limits and making people uncomfortable and exploring the depths of reality. I absolutely love this formation. Now, it's going to bring additional difficulties because the moon is also at 0 degrees of Scorpio. Interesting, we have a second chart with 0 degree Scorpio moon, right, one right after another. And again, these charts are submitted randomly, so it always tickles me when there's so striking of a similarity in the chart. Um, but yeah, anyway, so we have the moon in Scorpio in the 10th house of success, which, although the moon is in the 10th house of success, which is a very forward placement, a moon in the 10th often vocalizes its emotions very strongly. But Scorpio is a sign that loves to hide things, right? So we need to be aware that the moon is not going to be as forthcoming as it normally would in the 10th house because it's being ruled by it's placed in a sign that is naturally hidden, and the moon is of detriment, so emotions are going to be tricky. Emotional intelligence will be needed. It would be very important early on in life to put self-development books into the hands of this child, because what I think will happen is because it's the need to bust the mold to break the mold, we need to learn the rules before we can break them. And that's also something that fixed signs in general go through as they develop, as they start to understand, okay, I can choose to be stubborn and I can choose to use the rules to my advantage, right? Or I can break them for my convenience and blow past the expected result. Yeah, and venture into something new. So it's kind of like that shield that fixed signs really get at the beginning of their life, which I think is delicious. We also have that 0 degree moon applying to a sextile with Mercury in Capricorn, and this is where the chart really starts to get interesting, and we're starting to unpack some really beautiful stuff. Because we have Mercury at 0 degrees of Capricorn, Venus at 8 degrees of Capricorn, and then Pluto in Capricorn here as well in the 12th house of hidden enemies, retreats, hospitalization, and jails. The ruler of the chart, Saturn in the 10th, is ruling this 12th house. And this is what I think is really, really positive about the chart. When I see strong 12th house rulership, as well as Mercury getting involved, and Mercury being in a trine with the moon, this is where we see octaves of experience come forward. If the Mars is not recognized, if the moon is not paid attention to, if Mercury is not nourished, and if Saturn is not respected, right? If the idea of boundaries, if the idea of emotional wellness, if the idea of the rebellious side is not kind of fostered and creativity is given to this individual as they grow, then they will likely end up as a product of the jail system. They will need to be shipped away. They will need to be put into the 12th house, into boarding school, into juvenile detention, into stricter Capricornian molds, so that they can grow in a way that is training them to become a little bit more structured. However, yeah, if these planets are well nourished, yeah, this person is going to make an excellent therapist, and a scarily excellent therapist. Not just with the Scorpio moon, but the ruler of the chart ruling the 12th house from the 10th house of success, co-present with Mars in Aquarius, the rule breaker. I just really think that this person would be able to understand the system, break the system, and help develop new rules to help people truly recover. Because the 12th house, although it is a house of great danger, if approached with disregard, and if that rebel archetype really starts to get to you, and you're starting to like take drug-filled walks in the moonlight, and you're not aware that that's dangerous. Like if you start to become too risky, that 12th house can be a problem because you're inviting drastic change, which the 12th house does very well, bordering on that dangerous death line. But when we look at the 12th house as a healing house, a house of great but intense transformation, this chart is uniquely qualified to help somebody process those deep aching transformations that need to be pulled out by an expert extractor, which Saturn in Scorpio, Moon in Scorpio, Mars in Aquarius, like very unconventional, but very good at what they do. Love it. So interesting. Also, Sun in Sagittarius, total misnomer thrown into the chart, which I think works in dramatic favor with this chart. So much depth, so much crazy, so much intrigue, so much healing, right? And then this spunky Sun comes along and is just like, I'm Sagittarius. I pose no threat. I will make random jokes to put you at ease. I am slightly aloof. And it's that energy that really sugarcoats the rest of the chart and brings charisma forward in the 11th house of friendships, which I think is deliciously placed. But I think it's also a trick. It's a facade. It's a great mask. But we need to understand that high energy, kind of aloof, spontaneous person is indeed fake. And that the true work of the chart is deeper, it's darker, it's more intense, it's more dramatic. And it is far more interesting than that Sun in Sagittarius would lead you to believe. And in some ways, it's a test, right? Can somebody see through the facade and meet that Scorpio moon, meet that Scorpio Saturn, be willing to jump over the hedge with that Mars and Aquarius? Just absolutely lovely placements. And marrying a Muggle, Prue, with the Sun in Sagittarius being ruled by Jupiter and Leo in the 7th, she's going to be attracted to the average, famous, mayoral energy, where she's just going to be attracted to somebody who's in power for being blissfully normal. Somebody who's carefree, somebody who can spot talent, but somebody who is kind of wrapped up in the normalness of being who they are to the fullest radiant extent of their ability, somebody who shows no signs of hiding, somebody who is truly just out in the open, is who this person is attracted to. And it's because they use their fish hooks and their kind of angler fish nature. I love that energy for this chart, angler fish, very, very present. That would be a great kind of energy to evoke and to work with, that anglerfish energy. But being attracted to a spouse who's the exact opposite, who's not hiding in the darkness, who's not working in the deeper realms, who's kind of just bouncing through life on a whim, radiating that solar Jupiter and Leo energy, which I find very, very both delicious, but it's just the exact opposite of what this chart cultivates. Money will also come very, very freely from the relationship itself. Although it may be tricky and there may be financial problems in the marriage, so we definitely need to make sure a CPA is consulted and that money is not left to the spouse, but that money is channeled and harnessed, because money is rather confusing to this chart. We have Neptune in Pisces in the second house of finance, which is not a great financial placement, but money has a good chance of being earned through the spousal connection, spousal relationships. But because Jupiter is still retrograde, we need to make sure that the money that comes in from the marriage or from the partnership is handled by somebody else who has better financial placements than this chart. Okay, cool. Excellent. Oh, and the capstone of this chart is college level teaching and instruction, just as an FYI. Okay, so that is Prue's chart. And then we are on to chart number 5. Chart number 5 is Bradley from Tampa, Florida. Cheers, Bradley. Great to see you. Great to see your face again. Let's take a peek at your chart. Okay, what do we got? Scorpio moons seem to be a theme. This morning. And also in the 12th house, we have Scorpio moon in the 12th, which again is really really interesting stuff. Hey Mary, I see that you jumped on Instagram. I literally just finished your chart a couple ones back. So once the live stream is done recording, you'll be able to watch the replay on that. Anyway, so back to Bradley. So when we have Scorpio moon, it's interesting. The Scorpio moon being in the 12th house, I had mentioned 12th house placements tend to make a great therapist, but it also tends to cause a little bit of trouble for the native if not expressed properly. A moon in Scorpio in the 12th really tends to hide emotion, like lock it away and then lock that away. Scorpio is a hidden sign by nature, but putting Scorpio in the 12th is putting locks on locks. And unfortunately, what tends to happen with a Scorpio moon in the 12th is they lock away their emotions and they forget the key, or they forget that the emotions are locked in there and they tend to fester. Yeah. So we need to induce emotional vomiting in this chart on a regular basis. And I think that we need to just be rather aware of the fact that the most sensitive planet in the chart, who's almost full, by the way, which brings power to the moon, is in the 12th house of therapy, of hidden enemies, of hospitalizations, of karmic healing, but is hiding and is very much about that deeper transformation that needs to be induced in the self, but can also be leveraged to be induced in others. Question, did you say Sun in Taurus, Moon in Aries, rising? No, I did not say that. Okay, so when we look at the rest of the chart, so let's start from the beginning. We have the ascendant in Sagittarius. Ascendant in Sagittarius brings a seeker energy to the chart. It brings this kind of spunky firework energy to the chart. There's a really nice happy-go-luckiness to Sagittarius, which I very much enjoy. Always the jokester, always the trickster, slightly aloof, slightly foolish. And when I say foolish, I don't mean stupid. I mean like the fool of the arcana, the major arcana in the tarot, like somebody who's just here for the adventure, right? Not necessarily looking 10 steps ahead, but that ascendant really blesses the grace of aloofness to the chart. But that aloofness can be fun and spontaneous as well. The ruler of the chart is a very well-placed Jupiter. The Jupiter in Leo in the 9th, I'm a huge fan of. Actually, I'm a big fan of this Jupiter. So this Jupiter in Leo in the 9th really blows up the center of spirituality. having the ruler of the chart be Jupiter naturally makes this chart rather expansive, makes this chart rather prosperous as well. But when we see Jupiter in Leo in the ninth, spirituality can be used as a veil. It can be used as a touting. It can be used as a hey, look at me, I'm so spiritual type label. And I don't necessarily enjoy that. Jupiter, when mishandled, tends to be very showboaty. Yeah, especially when placed in Leo. So we need to be aware that spirituality is not flaunted or pushed on other people. Like indoctrination would be the worst extreme of this Jupiter in Leo. But then Jupiter in Leo in the ninth, is somebody who's very devout, who's somebody where spirituality is a very big part of their life. So are secondary topics of the ninth house, such as travel, foreigners, and higher education. It's going to be somebody who constantly pursues learning. It's going to be somebody who's constantly traveling, trying to explore other cultures, unpack the spirituality of other cultures as well. Somebody who's constantly surrounding themselves with the worldliness of the ninth house. That's where they thrive. We do have an interesting combination, though, here. Because Mars is conjoining Venus by degree at 16 degrees, almost exactly. Mars is at 53 minutes in, Venus is at 57 minutes in, but they're so close. And I've said this before. Whenever we see Mars and Venus co-present, the feminine and the masculine principles, the yin and the yang principles co-present in the chart, I always remind people that sexual identity is going to be part of the dynamic. Venus is that yin energy, Mars is that yang energy. How do we balance those two polarities within ourselves? The idea of being pansexual, bisexual, the idea of struggling with male-female dynamics within the body as well. That's going to be a part of the natural identity of the native, especially because we have the Lord of the chart co-present within the same house. The spiritual exploration of androgyny and the idea of kind of the hermaphroditic mysteries would be something that would be very appealing to this person, because especially when we look at old mythology, those people who were born with both genitalia were thought to straddle the worlds, people who are known to be two-spirited, yeah? And that's definitely a side of the culture and a side of spiritual lore that is very attractive, but might also hit home rather personally to this person as well. When we look at sun placement, so sun placement is in Cancer in the 8th, co-present with Mercury. Mercury is combusting Cancer, not necessarily so great. Speech might be a little bit off because we have Mercury, the planet of speech and the mind, eclipsed by the sun. Oh no, just kidding, they're not eclipsed. Just kidding. That's my bad. I misinterpreted. 7.5 degrees is the combustion range, and Sun is at 1 degree. Mercury is at 10, so we're fine with that. Why did I trip up on that, though? That's an interesting... This is where the intuitive kind of side of the chart comes forward. What are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to tell me, my dear? What is fascinating to me about the 8th house? So the 8th house is about death. It's also about taxes, business, estates. To put the sun in Cancer here, it brings this kind of motherly energy into the chart in those topics. So you starting your own practice and identifying very heavily with that. But there are factors financially that will stop you from doing that because we have Uranus, Neptune, and the North Node opposing by sign those aspects. Interesting. So this is where we get messy in the chart. There's conflict here. There's an interesting pairing of, do we focus on money? Do we focus on independence? There's a strong death slant in the chart. Would not surprise me if, especially because of the spiritual nature of this chart, mediumship was very forward. The contact with the other side was very forward. I would encourage the study of spiritualism in this chart, especially with the Scorpio moon in the 12th. Great topic for this chart to study. Because Mercury is in the 8th house of death, ruling the 7th house of relationships, the death of a spouse is going to be something that I think will weigh heavily on the mind on a regular basis. And that's something that the spirituality is here to kind of remedy and counterbalance, because you can't not put yourself out there just because, oh, well, at some point the person that I love will die, right? That's nature, darling. But that's also where your mediumship abilities come in, and that's also where your seeking of spirituality comes in, is you weaving together the threads of your experience and understanding that just because a physical end occurs does not mean that the love ends, yeah, or that the relationship is finished, for that matter. It would also be very important to work abroad, work internationally, potentially travel or do mission work. I think that would be very important for the chart as well. Where is Saturn? Where's Saturn? Saturn is in the 3rd house, so where money will be made in the chart. Oh, and Saturn's in Aquarius. That's nice. Where money will be made in the chart is actually going to be in the realm of teaching. Yeah. Because Saturn is there, so I would highly encourage becoming an educator yourself. I would highly encourage anything that you can do or touch from an educational perspective. I think that's going to be really important, because what will happen is, as you tap into that writing, teaching, and speaking part of your chart, that will start to unlock your financial area as well. Yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. Yep. Cool. Excellent. Thank you, Bradley. I appreciate you donating your chart to the live stream. And yeah, so thank you, everybody, for joining on. For those of you who stayed with me, we had a lot of people following on Facebook and Instagram. If you would like to be a part of the live stream, I just did an all-call last week. I'm still accepting charts. All you need to do is private message me your birth date, your birthplace, and your exact birth time. I need those 3 details to run an accurate chart. There is no exception to that. I can also run charts for your friends and family and add them to the list as well, always with consent. Never send me a chart without asking somebody's permission. And yeah, I do these on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10:30 every single time. And if you would like to book a consult with me, if you would like to go a little bit more deep into the one-on-one dynamics of your chart, you can always visit my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com, as well as if you're interested in learning astrology. I have pre-recorded classes, astrology bundles that are all underneath $100 that you can start your astrological journey there. I have books that I recommend in those courses as well, if you're interested in studying and watching the stars with me. But yeah, I will see you all on Wednesday at 10:30 when we do this second round of the live stream. Until then, may the stars be ever in your favor.